Hello and welcome to this edition of Commerce Close-Up. I'm your host, Dr. John Bellotti. I'm the Director of Speech Communication at Texas A&M University Commerce and also the Mayor of Commerce. The East Texas War and Memory Project, the title of this week's program. I'm pleased to have with me as my guests two members of the Texas A&M University Commerce Honors College who are working on this interestingly named concept or project, Haley Hasek and Jackson Daly. Haley, would you please introduce your cohort?
Yeah, this is Jackson Daly. He is one of the interns with the East Texas War and Memory Project. I'm the coordinator, and basically our project is intended to kind of capture and preserve the stories of military veterans and their families. We focus on World War II through Vietnam veterans, Cold War thrown in there, home front stories, and at some point would really like to branch out beyond Vietnam. But there are a ton of veterans right now, World War II through Vietnam, and obviously their age and their health is something that we are taking into consideration. We know that this is a fight we are probably going to lose, but we are going to go down without losing. Well, yeah, we're going to try. We're going to try not to lose too many of them.
I made a comment that I was reading on some of the reports about 2 years. We're in this 24-month cycle, and you might mention to our audience the fact that the war ended before 1945, as it did for us in the Pacific and in other parts of Europe. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Well, I mean, when we talk about their war stories, we don't preserve, or we're not preserving just their military experience. It's kind of a life history project. So we talk to them about the veterans and their families, whoever we interview, about their childhood and where they came from and where they grew up and what their parents did and how they ended up in the military. And then we go through their service from beginning to end, whatever it might be. Some of them had a very kind of stereotypical service of they went in, they were drafted, immediately sent overseas, fought, and were in kind of the thick of it when the war ended. Some of them have a much more non-traditional story, or something that we don't often associate with a war story or a combat story. And then we talk to them about kind of their post-war experience and what the war experience did to them, how it shaped them, their perception of kind of the world, what they ended up doing, those kinds of things.
Before we get to Jackson, a couple of specifics. I have kind of one more question for you. How did the project come about?
It was a series of classes that kind of led to this. Dr. Groover is the advisor. He's the assistant dean of the Honors College and a history professor. So he was trying to find ways to teach us about war and about World War II in a way that we would understand, in a way we could relate to, and oral histories seemed to be that way. It was really kind of, I guess, the best way for us to put a real life person with all of the experiences we were reading about in books and watching in movies. And then I had started my honors thesis and taught some of these young freshmen who got excited about it too. And that's when we approached Dr. Groover and asked if a project was a possibility. It's obviously something one person can't do, and having other people excited about it really just got the ball rolling. And
many of our audience may not know how fortunate Commerce is to be the home of some very famous World War II veterans, including Claire Chennault and
Otha Spencer. I like to think of all of the veterans that we interview as famous. I say that they're ordinary people who did extraordinary things. We meet them next door, and some of the stories are blockbuster stories that you wouldn't necessarily expect from someone whose name you've never heard of.
Well, Jackson's not just window dressing.
No.
Tell us what you're doing, Jackson.
All right. As Haley said, we talked to a couple of people who do tell extraordinary blockbuster stories. I'm a sophomore in the internship, and I kind of got it started a little bit with Haley. And along the way, I interviewed a man by the name of, I like to call him Command Sergeant Major Dwight James, because I've done 2 different interviews with him so far, and it's 7 hours total. And if you can imagine sitting in front of a World War II veteran that served 30 years through all three of the major wars that we're focusing on right now, you can imagine that he has pretty amazing stories. He's won 2 different Bronze Stars, a Silver Star, and 2 different Legions of Merit for his service. And I look forward to talking to him every day.
What's your favorite story that he's told?
My favorite story is his Silver Star story. He was in Korea, and in Korea he was a tank commander. And during one of his expeditions or journeys through Korea, his commander told him that he was going to, they were going to push the front line forward towards China. Well, he ended up being the lead tank on this mission, and they were going to have to go behind enemy lines to do this. And it was a night mission, and he said that while they were going through the town that the mission was in, it was completely covert ops. The commanding officer told him not to fire unless fired upon. And while they were going through, he talked about seeing people peeping out of the windows, and the commanding officer was on the road in front of them watching them come toward him. And he said it was the scariest thing he'd ever experienced. And that's not even the top of it. As they got dead center in the middle of the town, he said, as the tank commander, he was at out of the top of the tank, watching everything that's happening. And he said that their commanding officer hesitated and kind of thought something was suspicious. So he kept watching him, got closer and closer. As he was right up on him, the commanding officer, right before he took his gun off of his shoulder, Dwight said that he was ready with the 50. After he shot and killed their commanding officer, the whole town lit up on his tank. And I loved how he wrapped it up, because he just says, I was involved in all that mess. and so that's how he earned his Silver Star. But it's amazing that he'll just tell you like that.
Like it was no big deal.
Like it was no big deal. And we're talking about, this is a blockbuster story, and he has more than that. He later, in Korea, he also saved 6 POWs that were captured in battles. And he's just an amazing man.
And this will turn into your master's thesis, your honors thesis.
Yes, I'm focusing on him, his World War II service for my honors thesis, and I actually later want to write my master's thesis using his story as well.
Great, thank you. I want to thank my guests, Haley Hassick and Jackson Daly. This concludes our edition this week of Commerce Close-Up. Please join us again for our next program. We'll delve deeper into the War and Memory Project, Heroes from Commerce, Texas.